I want to welcome all of you to this Hall of Fame induction ceremony. This Hall of Fame is important to the city of Columbus because it represents special people who have done special things for the city of Columbus. This represents the heart and soul of our city. And every single person that's been inducted to this Hall of Fame are people that we're saying, thank you. Thank you for your service. Thank you for making this city a better place than what it was. And so this is our special year because this is our 200th year anniversary, our bicentennial. In fact, our city was founded on February 14th, 1812, when there was a great debate in the state legislature of what to name our city. One group of people wanted the city of Columbus to be named the Ohio City. And a guy that owned a tavern on the West Bank in Franklinton, a guy by the name of Joseph Foose, wanted to name the city as the city of Columbus. Big debate. There was a debate on where to locate the capital. It was in Zanesville. They talked about it being in Reynoldsburg. Chillicothe was, in fact, indeed the first capital of the state of Ohio. And so, in this big debate of what to name the city of Columbus, Joseph Foose, who owned this tavern, invited the entire state legislature over to his bar. And after a few drinks, he got everybody to agree to name the Ohio City as the city of Columbus. And so they went back across the river and they named this city the city of Columbus. This is a special year. And on this special year, we have some extraordinary people being inducted into the Hall of Fame. It is of great surprise that the founder of the city of Columbus, Lucas Sullivant, was not already in the Hall of Fame. And when we discovered that, on this 200th year anniversary, it was important that we recognize the person that laid a stake in the ground and said, we will settle here in this community, starting out with Franklinton. And then, in addition to Lucas Sullivant, will be one of the most important people in the art world, in the entire world, Aminah Robinson. She represents the artistic passion of our city, the genius towards creativity. And Lucas Sullivant, being the founder of our city, Aminah Robinson is the artistic soul of our city. Someone I'm so proud of. Every time I come into her presence, I feel the energy. Not just me, anybody that comes into the presence of Aminah Robinson. There's a special energy that emanates from her genius. And I do say genius. She has made me proud, made all of our citizens proud. She's world renowned, and she's right here in the city of Columbus. And then there's my good friend and mentor, Hugh J. Dorrian. Now, if the founder of our city, or if Lucas Sullivant is considered the founder of our city, and Aminah Robinson is considered the artistic soul of our city, then Hugh Dorrian is the keeper of our city. The keeper of our city, making sure that we walk the straight path. And he represents the financial compass of our city. And this is a man who loves the city of Columbus. And I look out about the city and Sometimes I stick my chest out and say, oh, this is my city. No, it's not. This is Hugh Dorrian's city. I know that. Everybody knows that. So I'm not going to fool myself. When I see our skyline, I think about Hugh Dorrian. When I see our streets and our roads, I think about Hugh Dorrian. When I think about what's underneath our roads, our sewer systems, our water systems, I think about Hugh Dorrian. When I think about our extraordinary financial situation in the city of Columbus, the fact that we're the only city of our size with the highest credit rating available from all 3 credit rating agencies, I think about Hugh Dorrian. When I think about that, I think about the fact that Columbus has a better credit rating than the state of Ohio, the United States government, and there are only 12 countries in the world that equals what this man has accomplished in the city of Columbus. I can't think of anyone that has contributed to the progress, more progress, to this city than Hugh Dorrian. So these 3 great icons, Lucas Sullivant, our founder, where we began, how we started out, Aminah Robinson, the artistic spirit and soul and creativity of our community embodied in one person, and then the keeper of our city, Hugh J. Dorrian. I'm proud and pleased to present to you these 3 inductees into the Bicentennial Hall of Fame. So I would like to bring up Sarah Rogers. I saw Sarah. There she is, right here, who will talk. I'm sorry, before I do that, I got to bring up, Jeff Lefevre, Columbus Historical Society. Jeff, right here, sitting right here, who will formally induct Lucas Sullivant into the Hall of Fame.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good to see everybody. Honorable Mayor Coleman, City Council members, honorable guests here today. Can't believe Lucas Sullivant wasn't in the Hall of Fame. But what a better year to honor him in the 200th anniversary or birthday of our city this year, because Lucas is where it all started. Let's go back a little bit and talk about who Lucas was. For those of you who don't know yet, Lucas was a surveyor from Virginia. He was working for the Virginia Military District in the New Northwest Territory. And he was surveying the areas in the area around central Ohio, wasn't even that at that point, laying out the counties and stuff. And the government didn't have a lot of money back then, late 1700s, but they had a lot of land. And so they told Lucas they'd give him 6,000 acres in payment for the work he was doing. So he chose those 6,000 acres to be at the junction of these 2 little rivers, the Scioto and the Olentangy rivers, going westward from there. So he got the land, brought his family in, started building his village of Franklinton, and decided, well, what am I going to do? How am I going to make this area prosperous? We weren't on a great lake. We're not on a major river that goes down to the Mississippi with lots of shipping. Long before railroads come here or planes or anything, there was some Native American trails, lots of forests, some swampy land on the west side that was good for farming, but not so good for settlement because it occasionally floods, and they had to move the village a couple times further westward so it wouldn't flood. So it gets the idea of let's give away lots. Let's give lots to people who come here. Anybody who comes here to improve the lot can live here for free. And those lots were on Gift Street, just a few blocks west of here, which still exists today. But that wasn't enough for Lucas. He wanted more. He wanted his village to prosper even more. So him and some of his buddies in Franklinton heard that the state was looking for a new central home for the capital of Ohio. You heard the mayor talk about it, floated around between Chillicothe and Zanesville. And he thought this was the perfect spot. It was centrally located, and it would make his village prosper. He was also very smart. He knew Franklinton flooded, so him and his buddies got together, and they bought 10 acres of land on the high bank of the river where it didn't flood. They also bought land for the penitentiary, which would bring a labor force and jobs. And just to entice the legislatures to move it here, he threw in $50,000 to build a building on that site. Too good of an offer to turn down. There were many places vying for it, as you heard. Dublin was another one. There's many stories about how they finally decided on it. There's a particular card game done in a tavern up in Dublin we hear about that we're not quite sure happened or not. But we do know some government happened. Yeah, some government did happen at those eras in those taverns, as we heard. So they decide to put the capital on those 10 acres, and we become one of the first and only planned capital cities in the nation. There was nothing there. There was a Native American mound, some Native American trails, there was an old still, and there was a cabin on the West Bank. And so on February 14th, 1812, the state legislators designated that 10-acre site to be the site for the new state capital. Hence, Columbus was born, hence why we're all here today. We talk about Lucas. In the bicentennial year, we've talked about how we are a smart and open city. And I think that's our DNA, and it goes all the way back to our founder. Number one, we hear that Lucas was very smart because he gave away lots. He got the State House to come here, which brought jobs and opportunity and businesses and funding. His family goes on to help get the Ohio State University here. They do development. They get the state hospital on the Hilltop area when it was out there. They do development on the east side. So they did a lot of stuff here, but he was also a very open person. He welcomed everybody here to the city of Columbus. And one of the most interesting stories is there was a servant that Sarah had, his wife, who had become pregnant. She was African American, and she had a child, and the parents disappear. And Arthur Boak was born, but he was abandoned. He's the first African American born in Franklin County. And Lucas and Sarah were such open people, bringing people to Columbus. They adopted that child, and Sarah actually breastfed him as her own because she had just had her own child. And that child was Arthur Boak, raised with the family, buried at Green Lawn Cemetery right next to him down there. And so that's part of our DNA as we look at the bicentennial. We look at how we're a smart and open city. It goes back to our original founder, Lucas Sullivant. I can't think of a more appropriate person to honor this year in the bicentennial, because if it wasn't for Lucas, we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't have a Columbus Hall of Fame, because he's the one that started it all. Thank you.
In honor of the father of our city, we present you this citation of recognition for Lucas Sullivant.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you. We'll keep it and treasure it.
And now I'd like to bring up Sarah Rogers to say a few words about the heart and soul of our artistic heart and soul of our city, Aminah Robinson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It is my great honor to represent the board and staff of the Columbus Museum of Art at this very special occasion, the induction of Aminah Robinson into the Columbus Hall of Fame. It's also a personal honor, as I have had the pleasure of exhibiting Aminah's work, and am a long-standing and ardent fan of her creative vision. It is very appropriate that Aminah receive this honor in 2012, the year of the city's bicentennial. There are many reasons why this is appropriate, but perhaps the most poignant is currently on view at the museum, her exhibition, Songs for a New Millennium, 1812 to 2012. This series of works leads you on a historic journey through Columbus as seen through her eyes and the eyes of her beloved Uncle Alvin. It traces, tracks, and remembers the stories, the places, but most importantly, the spirit of the people, all of those who have come before us and left their marks and their stories just for us. At the recent opening of this exhibition, Aminah reminded us that perhaps our most important job as citizens is to listen. Listen to the stories of our elders and loved ones. Remember the stories and pass them forward. This is what Aminah does so eloquently through her large-scale drawings, paintings, constructions, and collages. She passes the past forward through visual poems that make us remember. At the center of the exhibition is a large, colorful map that illustrates the history of the Blackberry Patch, the bustling neighborhood of the east side of Columbus in the early decades of the 20th century. Aminah tracks the landmarks, the changes in the street names, the disappearance and reappearance of roads. It's a kind of time capsule folded open for us to contemplate. It is a work in progress, and fortunately we sense that Aminah will have many more songs to sing to us. We are very proud to call Aminah our own, as Mr. Mayor told us. She was born in Columbus and grew up in Poindexter Village, then the new federally funded housing development on the east side. From a very, very young age, Aminah was a maker, always looking to her immediate environment for her subjects. Her father taught her how to make books from paper and homemade hogmog. Hogmog is a mixture of mud, clay, twigs, leaves, lime, animal grease, and glue. Her mother taught her weaving, needlework, and buttonwork. She drew, she painted, and eventually she attended classes at the Columbus Art School, which now is CCAD. And in 1968, something very, very special happened. Art patron Fran Luckoff introduced Aminah to woodcarver Elijah Pierce. And that marked the beginning of a very long and very special friendship. And we're also fortunate, in celebration of the bicentennial, we have a remarkable exhibition on view at the museum of the works of Mr. Pierce. Aminah influenced many, many young artists through her 20-year career as an instructor at the Columbus Parks and Rec. By the early 80s, with some international travel under her belt, including a trip to Africa that dramatically influenced her life, she began exhibiting, first throughout Ohio, then nationally and internationally. Her work is in many, many private collections, as well as public collections, including Columbus Museum of Art, Cincinnati Art Museum, the Brooklyn Museum of Art, Tacoma Art Museum, and Newark Museum. And in 2004, Aminah received the coveted MacArthur Genius Award, confirming what we in Columbus already knew about her genius. Aminah really is a quintessential contemporary artist in her refusal to stick to one medium. Paper, fabric, buttons, homemade clay, found objects, buttons, sometimes more buttons are used. And she works in many formats, creating books, sculptures, murals, drawings, paintings on fabric, dolls, room-sized creations, or tiny, beautiful offerings you can hold in your hand. It would be impossible for me to decide if I have a favorite. I love the Mount Vernon series, her memory maps, which taught me much about this wonderful neighborhood, and her many, many books, whether they're about Poindexter Village or her trips to the Holy Land. But today, as she receives this great honor, I think about how she has taught all of us to listen with our eyes and with our ears, to remember and hopefully to pass along the great songs of our life here in Columbus. And for that gift, Aminah, thank you very much.
Aminah, if you could, please. We want to hear from you after I present you with this citation and recognition of your induction into the highest honor in the city of Columbus, our Hall of Fame. Congratulations.
I'm deeply honored. And one's life and one's work is the sum total of one's family, one's community, and the institutions that surrounds that individuals. You can't get away from it. There's no way you can walk away from it. It is a part of one's whole intrinsic life. So, my life comes out of this community, and whatever is given to me with such honor and respect and love, it's because of you. It's because of my family. is because of my community, and especially Poindexter Village, where as a young kid of 3 years old, I still could not talk. So my father began to skill me in observational penetrations, where I would remember and learn, and I would draw. Well, what day is it? Well, I couldn't talk, so I would draw it in my little notebooks. He would say, what kind of weather are we having? And what does this weather smell like? So if it's snowing, I would draw snow. Well, what does it smell like? What does the snow smell like? Well, I would draw ice. Ice coming from the refrigerator. The young people may not know what an ice box is. A block of 50 pounds or 100-pound block of ice. That's what snow smelt to me, cold. So I would draw it. And slowly and surely, I began to speak by the time I was 5 or 6. But some other interesting things happened. My uncle, at 3, began to pass on these stories of the blackberry patch. You see, my mother and my uncle and my grandmother, they all were born and raised in the blackberry patch. And some of the family before lived on Water Street, Uncle Bill's bait shop, you see. So, eastward migration. And then my great aunt, who came through the transatlantic slave trade, passed on those stories to me. Well, I couldn't talk, so all I could do was listen. And that is what I did. And I am truly grateful to them for giving me the love and cherishing each child coming out of Poindexter Village. Every child coming out of Poindexter Village was loved and cherished. And so by the time school came, they were ready. Teachers, principals, all lived side by side. It was a wonderful community. Extremely grateful, the gratefulness of this community, I do not see today. But as Mr. Pierce says, you must continue to do the work. And my uncle says, continue to write the stories down. So I try to do the things I know is right for my community, which I truly love. Thank you for this wonderful honor.
I want to acknowledge the presence of City Attorney Rick Pfeiffer, who's here, Councilmember Herschel Craig, Councilmember Eileen Paley, Councilmember Priscilla Tyson, as well as Judge Julia Dorrian. It runs in the family. Now I'd like for John Rosenberger, former Executive Director of Capital South, come up, please, and introduce Mr. Hugh Dorrian.
Hugh J. Dorrian, or as we, his close personal friends, refer to him, Mr. Dorrian. It's true, isn't it?
That's true.
There's a wonderful symmetry at foot here with the program opening with Lucas Sullivant, the father of Franklinton, and Mr. Dorrian, a son of Franklinton, closing the event. I'm very intimidated offering my remarks here today. I said to Mr. Dorrian, if he'd simply been a man of fewer awards and lesser accomplishments, this had been so much easier. And the mayor's eloquent remarks certainly took a big load off of my responsibilities today. You know, you can't measure how far a man has come until you know where it all began, and it all began in Franklinton, when another Hugh Dorrian and one Anna Flaherty Dorrian, Irish immigrants, chose Franklinton as the place to settle and make home. They were fruitful and multiplied 8 children. Mr. Dorrian was the 7th. 4 of his siblings are here today, which is a very nice tribute. And we all remember one, Michael Dorrian, a brother, who set the pace with respect to public service, and I think probably inspired Mr. Dorrian a little bit to pursue a future and career in public service. And of course, they all went to Holy Family grade school. They were all Sunshine Park regulars. They are Franklinton. Hugh worked for many hours in his father's store over near Mount Vernon Avenue, a place we now call the King Lincoln District. I'll hazard a guess it's where he first learned to count the pennies. You know, you can take the boy out of Franklinton, but you can't take the Franklinton out of the boy. It's no mistake that every time I see him dining, it's at Tommy's Diner or the Florentine or Phillips Coney Island. And it's no mistake that his office has a view of Franklinton. After Franklinton, if you will, it was on to St. Charles Preparatory, and on to the Ohio State University, where he took a degree in accounting. A couple years later, he was a certified public accountant and destined for a future of successful accounting practice. He took a wife, Janice, with us today, and they were fruitful and multiplied, with Joe, Mary, Margaret, and Julie, Judge Julie to me. And they in turn have been fruitful and multiplied, and there's 10 grandchildren to show for it. Mr. Dorrian entered into public service at the invitation of Mayor Sensenbrenner, who thought he would be a dandy city treasurer. Mr. Dorrian resisted the notion. Sensenbrenner is, quote, remembered as saying, "Dorrian, when the city calls, you serve." Sounds like something M.E. Sensenbrenner would have said. In any case, he became city treasurer in '66, was appointed the city auditor for the first time late in '69, and then in '69 began being elected to 11 successive 4-year terms. His prowess at the ballot box is legendary. I must share a story. Back during the Reinhardt administration, they would have parties, and they'd have little skits at these parties. You remember the Reinhardt administration was remembered for operating heavy machinery at news conferences and for an auto race downtown. In any case, it was a little skit at one of those parties, and I had to set this up because some people have forgotten Johnny Carson. Some people never heard of Johnny Carson. In any case, Johnny Carson, on his late-night comedy show, often did a skit where he was Karnak the Magnificent, I think, or Karnak the Great. And he'd wear this turban, and the whole setup was he would have an envelope, and in the envelope would be the answer. The question would be in the envelope. So Karnak the Great would give the answer, he would tear up the envelope and reveal the question. All right, so we're at this little party, and they've got the envelope, and just picture the turban. The answer is the Columbus 500. Tear open the envelope. The question is, what do we call the people who voted against Hugh Dorrian in the last municipal election? And it's reportedly, in some contested elections, he carried every precinct. So there's a lot of basis for that story. You know, I've been coming over here for a lot of years. I never did figure out what the city auditor does. I sort of figured out he keeps an eye on the money. There's a lot of money to keep an eye on over here. If you consider all the funds, about $2.8 billion come through here in the course of a year. Some of it's parked here for investment. That's another $1.7 million. A lot of money to pay attention to here. Sometimes we borrow for the big things in life. Hugh has Mr. Dorrian have his fingerprints on the borrowing of $14 billion. It's a big job. Early on in our relationship, once I came through the door, he said to the deputies, "Lock the vault." I thought he was just being funny, but it turned out he was serious. You know, it's ironic that Mr. Dorrian has never sought recognition or awards because he's absolutely been deluged by them. In your program is maybe 10% of the awards that has come his way. He's been recognized locally, nationally, internationally. My goodness, the Pope even gave him a medal. It's an impressive career and body of work. I can't read the list, it's just too long. But I do want you to appreciate the body of the work and the respect with which he is held, in which he is held by his peers. On that long list of awards, there were actually two that caught my eye. One's a Lifetime Achievement Award. Now, Mr. Dorrian, I figured out a long time ago, once they start saying lifetime achievement, that's the good stuff. That's the big ones. That's the big ones. The second one was an award for ethics in government. I have to tell you this story. Last year, Mr. Dorrian and I were working on the Nationwide Arena transaction. And we interrupted our work to note that Mr. Dorrian had just finished, I think, his 42nd year at City Auditor. And we did a little math and noted that we'd been working together for 28 years. And so it was a little sort of a nostalgic moment. So just a little later, when it came time to go to lunch, we went to Phillips Coney Island, of course. And I thought, with this bit of nostalgia still hanging in the air, wouldn't it be appropriate for me to pick up the check? The check was $12. Mr. Dorrian insisted on separate checks. I first met Mr. Dorrian in 1984. Mayor Reinhardt asked me to come downtown and work on some downtown development. His advice to me was, the first person you've got to go see is Mr. Dorrian. And I did, and we got along nicely. I remember as I left that I just met one of this community's most senior leaders, one of its elders, if you will. Mr. Dorrian was 49. About 15 years later, one of Mayor Richard Daley's descendants had become a high poobah at the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, was in the city for a little tour, and I was charged with giving him that tour. We did the tour, and at the end of the tour, we came back to City Hall. I said, I want to introduce you to the most powerful man in City Hall. I introduced him to Mr. Dorrian. Ladies and gentlemen, there's nothing of any importance that happens in this room, City Council chambers, where someone hasn't first asked, what does Mr. Dorrian think? Now, why is that? There's not a thing in the city charter that would suggest such a position of critical importance. I think it's all about respect. I think it's respect for Mr. Dorrian's institutional memory. If you don't remember what worked and what didn't, you're probably going to make the same mistakes over again. I've worked with him many times. We'll be in the middle of a deal, and he'll remember some obscure business detail in a deal we did 20 years ago. His memory for these things is just legendary. He'll tell me about court cases that were decided by the court that affected the rights of the city of Columbus that can't be found in any law book. He remembers it all. I think it's also respect for Mr. Dorrian's judgment. Important judgments get made in this room. They're tough judgments. We all know it. And we take all advice we can get, and on that list of people you want advice from is Mr. Dorrian. He isn't always right. He is human. But he is right so often you're a fool if you don't ask, and you're a bigger fool if you don't pay attention to what he tells you. But maybe more importantly, it's really about the respect that Hugh has in his relationships with others. Sure, he gets respect, but he gives respect. He always shows respect for the office of the mayor and the person who holds the job. He shows respect for city council and those who are serving. He's an equal opportunity respecter, if you will. He gives respect to every person with whom he has contact. Well, may I respectfully suggest that having a good memory for details, having good judgment, and giving respect probably doesn't get you in the Hall of Fame. Now, this will make Mr. Dorrian squirm. The better measure of man is not what he did single-handedly, but what he inspired others to do. You have inspired legions. For those of us who work to make this city a better place, you've inspired us to work harder. For those of us who care for our fellow citizens, you've inspired us to care more deeply. It's been a huge contribution to what we are and to what we are become. For that, Mr. Dorrian, you will have a place in the Hall of Fame, and for that, Mr. Dorrian, you will have a place in our hearts for eternity.
John, I've never heard you so eloquent. Mr. Dorrian, congratulations and thanks for all your years of service to our city. Thank you. Say a few words.
Well, thank you, Mayor, and thank you, John. Good friends. And first of all, I want to thank Almighty God for giving me these years and for giving me the opportunity to work with so many of you. And when I say so many of you, none of these accolades and none of these awards could be possible without having the world's greatest staff around you so many days. I was going, not 5 days a week, so many days. Just, if you will, just raise your hands, the staff of the City Auditor's Office. And I would simply say to you, you're the best of the best, but you got to keep it up. You've heard me say that before, I know. One of the ways you can win a lot of elections is to get a lot of votes, and that means keep creating big families. So there's so many of my siblings and my wife and daughters and grandchildren. If you will just raise your hands, you get a little idea. Thank you. And I mean, it's really an honor for me to be in the same class with you on this 200th day anniversary of Columbus. And I particularly thank you for the beauty that you have brought to this world. Thank you. Thank you. I've often said, and I think many of you have heard me say, I've always felt Columbus is a special place. It's a special community. We have every representation of ethnicities. We have different colors. We have different faiths. We have the whole spectrum of spirits, and we have the whole spectrum of wealth, and we have the whole spectrum of dedication, not only to public service, but also to the professions and the trades. And all of you in particular, obviously I'm biased in favor of public service, but all of you in public service and in private service, you help make this community. And I always think in terms of community and this collage of ethnicities and colors and faiths and spirits and so forth. And I have to say to you, I am so very proud of being a part of Columbus City government. And I've said this many times behind his back, and I'll say it very, very forthrightly here. I'm so proud to be associated with Michael B. Coleman. He's a good mayor for this city, and he cares about this community. I've often thought, the difference between a professional and an expert, I made these definitions up. An expert always brings their skills and their talents to the task. But the professional brings all those talents and skills and adds to it a great passion for service. And our mayor does that. So I thank you all so much for allowing me to be a part of this community. And Mayor, John, thank you for being here. Thank you for being a good mayor.
And there you have it, three great individuals that have helped change the city in their own way. And again, I'm so glad to have them as part of this 2012 bicentennial class, Hall of Fame, the highest honor that the city could bestow upon any human being. And congratulations to all of you. So what we'll do now is proceed downstairs. And everything okay? Where are we going? Downstairs for refreshments, and we have a what? And a ribbon cutting. We got a ribbon cutting, and we're going to show off the Hall of Fame kiosk. And the Hall of Fame kiosk was developed by Micro Industries. a generous donation, and it'll be the digital Hall of Fame display. So we're going to be able to see that as well. So let's proceed downstairs. 1, 2, 3.